What's up, everybody? This is the Act Man here, and today I'm joined by a special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, the lead designer of Halo Combat Evolved, Hardy Lebel.
What's up, Act? Hello, everyone.
Yo. So, first things first, we gotta make sure you're the real Hardy Lebel, right? I mean, we can't have this, little podcast discussion without everyone knowing that you're the real deal.
Hell yeah, I could be a Russian hack.
Yeah, so how can you prove it?
Well, I would recommend taking my face and or my voice and passing them through, authorization software, double check against the original Pimps at Sea demo trailer that was released, as a prank back at Bungie, and you'll see I'm the same guy.
So
you match up biometric data 100%.
All right, so if anyone wants to double check that he's not a hack, you can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I mean, I could be a really, really sophisticated, data generated construct, but I would be very expensive, prohibitively expensive. So I don't know about that.
I think the chances of that are slim. Anyways, so why don't you tell us about your involvement with the Halo franchise? What did you work on exactly with Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2, and what were your responsibilities?
Ooh, okay. I started at Bungie as a lead designer. They hired me away from Namco, where I had just finished working on a Pac-Man title. And I really didn't want to get stuck making Pac-Man for the rest of my career. And I knew that Bungie was looking for help. Bungie West, which was the office in San Jose, they were looking for a lead designer on an action title called Oni, which was had been a disaster. I think it's probably safe to say that the project was stalled for years. The team was really split in terms of kind of what project they wanted to make, and they really wanted to reach out and find a lead designer who had some experience and kind of could pull things together. So that's how I got started, and that's how I got the attention of Alex Seropian and Jason Jones, because I came into that project and really pulled Oni together, I'm very happy to say. And we got that thing out the door. It cost us all a piece of our soul, and there's a long story with that. But when Microsoft bought Bungie, they relocated our team. So we had two offices, one in San Jose and the other one in Chicago. And when we got bought by the mighty Soft, they reached down with their, powerful hands and scooped us all up from Chicago and San Jose and dropped us in Redmond, Washington together. And for a while, there was a real goal for us on the Bungie West side, the guys from San Jose, to do My Next Jam. So I had this pitch that was all put together, and we had this really cool promo video that was put together, and everybody was really excited about it. But it became clear that the Halo guys really needed it had to be all hands on deck. The Halo guys really needed help to be able to get the game out the door in time for Xbox launch. So Seropian and Jason Jones came to me and Michael Evans, who was the lead programmer on Oni, and they said, look, you guys did some good work on Oni. How'd you like to put multiplayer back into Halo? And I about lost my mind. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? They said, yeah, we got to cut multiplayer because we just, there isn't time and resources to put it in the game. And I'm losing my mind. I'm like, it's the most important part.
Now, how long before the game went gold did they come up to you and say multiplayer for Halo 1 was going to be cut?
About a year and a half.
Oh, okay. So a year and a half before. Yeah.
I mean, that last year was us basically creating everything that as H1 multiplayer. I mean, we basically did it from the ground up because the vision for what multiplayer was supposed to be in Halo was actually a lot more like Battlefield. We used to play early builds of multiplayer on Halo multiplayer back when we were two different offices in Chicago and San Jose. And it was a lot like Battlefield. I mean, there were objectives, and you could rush around with your team and drive the vehicles and shoot each other and fight about stuff. But when it came time to actually take the game off of PC and drop it onto console, everything had to be rethought, 100% to kind of make it work on console, make it work for the console experience with controllers in much more tightly focused environments, all that type of stuff. So we resurrected the feature, me and Michael, and ultimately there were 4 of us that were on the multiplayer team. there were kind of 3 of us full time and 1 contract person, and other people kind of contributing some level art and sort of some level art and a little bit of level design work here and there and that type of stuff. But it was just 4 of us on the team that resurrected it from the dead, from the cut pile.
From the cut pile, the pile that no one would ever see.
Yeah, and I was a huge Counter-Strike fan at the time. I mean, I played tons of Counter-Strike, so it just killed me when they said, because, okay, full disclosure, I had to cut multiplayer from Oni. Michael Evans and I were sitting there, we were looking at all the features on Oni, and man, I really wanted to shoot up a badass third-person, multiplayer game that integrated shooting and fighting. I was like, yes, come on, let's do this. But lots of story there. We just didn't have the resources to do a single-player game and multiplayer. And there was just no way I was going to go and have no multiplayer again. I'm like, come on, you're killing me with this.
It was going to be like another deja vu.
Yeah, absolutely. Deja vu all over again. So I'm like, no, we can't. And Seropian literally said, well, I'm so glad to hear you say that because you 2 suckers are the ones who've been elected to put it back in the game. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. So there you go. So anyway, I was a multiplayer lead on Halo. After we sat down and had, we went out to lunch at this Mexican restaurant. We wrote a bunch of kind of notes down on a napkin. And then once we got back to the office, Michael went to figure out how to hack our multiplayer level building tools into the Halo single player tool set, because they're like the stuff I needed to do for multiplayer maps was very different than what the single player guys needed to do. So kind of did a hack for me to stick that stuff into Gorilla, which is the name of the Halo, the Bungie tools. And then he went off to work on networking questions, and I had to learn how to do model 3D art environments inside of 3D Studio Max because we didn't have an artist. And I was like, well, how hard could it be? I'll just sit down and figure it out. There you go. Yeah, it was.
And from there, you created basically everything that we know as Halo 1's multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, we sure did. Yeah, we did.
Now, I have heard a rumor that some of the Halo 1 maps were created in a very short period of time. How long did it take you to make the map Rat Race?
It took me the entire duration of the tutorial section on the extrude function for 3D Studio Max. I was sitting there and I was like, okay, and it's talking about, make a cube. And now you're going to subdivide the walls on this cube and you're going to extrude different faces and you're going to connect them to other faces and stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. I'm learning how to extrude and subdivide faces and boop, 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 boop. About the time I was done with that tutorial, I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, yep, I think this is going to work as a map. I'll drop this baby in there. Make a couple of tweaks and we're good to go.
And wow. And that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I freely admit that not all the maps were as successful as others. Some, I was able to kind of spend much more time on. Others were really just products of, all right, well, we got to follow kind of good instincts and good foundational philosophy. Try to make some choices that I figured would be bulletproof. We didn't sit there and lavish a whole bunch of time sitting there going, oh gosh, I wonder if this pixel is in the right place.
Yeah. So you basically had to bunker down and just get it done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And making choices that are what I like to call bulletproof. Choices where, creative choices, technical choices that you really can rely on and are sound, foundational choices was a huge part of everything that we were doing with Halo multiplayer. I really was not interested in game modes or or any kind of interface choices or anything else that was the least bit weird or experimental. I was like, no, this has got to be bulletproof. It's got to be the kind of thing where I know this is going to work. I know we can draw people in. They're going to have fun doing this. If there's some game mode that's sort of weird and aspirational and no one's ever seen it before, but it might be really cool, like, oh, let's do warring factions fighting over moving checkpoints and blah 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 blah. I'm like, no, we ain't doing that.
No risks. I mean,
yeah.
To be fair, Halo had to start somewhere, and so did the multiplayer. So
Of course, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, anytime you're doing any production work, it's fun to sit down and kind of do blue sky planning and think about everything that you could possibly do. But if you ever really want to ship something, you have to do what I love to call subtraction, which is the process of sitting down and saying, okay, what are we going to get rid of? What are we going to cut so that we can spend the time and focus on whatever's left over to make it really good? And that process is so. Once you learn to love subtraction, once you learn to love cutting, that's when you really get good at any kind of creative development. I mean, you probably know the exact same thing with your films. Like,
oh yeah,
I'd have tons of material, but it just doesn't necessarily work as a video until you get rid of all the stuff that's, it's extraneous, or it's just not as clear, or it's not as funny, or it's not as compelling.
yeah.
You
You write a script and you think like, oh, this is pretty good, and then you get to the cutting board and then you're like, well, I say the same thing like 4 times in a row. Guess I gotta cut it, even though I was trying to be funny or what have you.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
So
that's such a healthy part of the process.
oh yeah. So what are you working on at the moment right now?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's funny because when you and I first got in touch about doing this video, I was kind of in the process of putting something together, and now I'm almost about to give up hope on that. So
Almost?
yeah, well, I don't know. I'm a huge believer in people learning to do game development on their own. I really learned so much by teaching myself, tools, technology, reading different techniques, watching tons of videos, all the rest of that type of thing. That method of learning about it, I think, is just so important and so powerful. And I see all these really fancy schools that want to charge people tons of money to learn stuff about game development that I firmly believe you can learn on your own, or, with a little bit of help. So I put together the Video Game Career Academy. Here, I'll show you my T-shirts right here. Academy, with the idea of basically saying, okay, I and other hardcore pros that I know will put together video training that people can sign up for. So you sign up for it, you join a class, and then you go through the video training, and then every week I would sit down. So my video training class was on level design, for example, and I want people to go, you buy the class, you go through the videos, and then every week we sit down and we go over all the exercises together, and we would have a face-to-face talk about, okay, this is what we're learning. Do you have questions about it? Are you trying to fold these principles into your own projects and all the rest of that type of stuff? But to be honest, I rolled this thing out there and kind of put it out into the world, and I thought that there would be a lot of people who would be interested in hearing what I had to say about level design, but so far that hasn't really been the case.
Could be it just needs the right amount of exposure, or
Yeah.
The more you keep at it, the more it can grow into something bigger. Kind of like what happened with my channel. We'll be putting a link in the description, maybe on screen as well, for Hardy Lebel's Creator Academy. So it's basically, a program that you can go check out, sign up for if you're interested at all in level design or how to make video games, basically anything like that. I mean, if you're someone that's in college and you're studying game design, it might be beneficial to go check this out. So Hardy, what was it like working for Bungie back in the day? And did you work with any well-known members of Bungie?
Working with Bungie was a lot like working for a pirate crew.
Thus the pimps at sea.
Yeah, the pimps at sea is a perfect example. Harkens back to that. And I say that because a lot of people who are really dedicated, passionate, they super care about all the stuff that they were working on, and they were very weird. I mean, just the weirdest weirdo. And just as a little bit of an insight, the Bungie official toast every year, Bungie likes to have kind of 2 big, or at least, I mean, they used to. I have no idea what they do these days, but in the old days, we used to have 2 big feasts. There was kind of like a Christmas, winter feast, and then there was the summer pentathlon. So the summer thing was kind of like a big everybody gets together and we play games outside and do tug of war and goofy stuff like that. And then, the winter thing, sometimes there would be a video game pentathlon, or board games or other type of stuff, indoor things, followed by a big Christmas dinner. And the toast every year, Jason and Alex, would stand up there and they'd say, "To us," and we'd all say, "To us." They'd say, "And those like us." And everybody would sort of laugh about the fact that we're the only ones that we knew who were like us.
Yeah.
We were super weirdos. So
the only people that were that weird.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there was Matt Sell, who had the preserved head of a dog in formaldehyde on his desk, and there was Rob McLeese, who was a hardcore survivalist and gun nut. To tell you a quick Rob McLeese story, one day I was sitting at my desk and Rob McLeese showed up at my desk, and he is a very intense guy. I mean, just super intense. And he's like, "Hardy, are you trying to piss me off?" And I'm looking at him like, "Lord, no, I am definitely not trying to do that. What's the problem?" Said, "Do you realize that the magnetic coordinates for every single multiplayer map are incorrect?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about, Rob?" Turns out that the magnetic coordinates for a Dyson sphere, like one of those big objects like the Halo, is supposed to be the magnetically aligned along with the axis of rotation. So, like, it north and south line up with the Halo itself. And Rob had modeled in a working compass on the gun sights of the assault rifle in Halo, and he was very careful to make sure that the magnetic axis of the Halo maps lined up, so that should anyone actually pull up the assault rifle and look at the compass, they would be able to tell which way was correct in terms of magnetic north relative to the compass. But you know what? I didn't know that was a thing that we were doing, and so I hadn't set it on the multiplayer maps, and I managed to piss him off. And I was like, "Listen, dude, I'm so sorry. I will fix it right now."
Right now. It's like, I don't think anybody would notice that unless like they were to hear it from you or someone else, but like that's just the level of detail that you guys put into the game.
Absolutely. And that's the level of passion that people at Bungie, longtime Bungie people really have had. Is just like, nobody cares about the end product more. No one cares about making sure that it is fun and satisfying and kind of has that feeling of authenticity. That was really one of the things that was a real differentiator, and it was just a fantastic experience to work with people who care that much.
That's good to hear, man.
As far as famous people, I mean, I worked with Peter Marks and Matt Sell and Jason Jones and Alex Seropian and Max Hoberman. I mean, I worked with all those people, like side by side. We were all in on trying to get Halo and Halo 2 out the door, in time to hit our marks. So
yeah.
Absolutely.
Aren't you forgetting someone? There's someone I think who did all the music and especially the sound effects for Halo 1's multiplayer. What was his name again? Because I'm sure he did the sound effects for Halo CE.
Oh, you're just trying to piss me off right now. You are just trying to. All right.
I know what buttons to push. Is it story time? I think it's story time.
Story time. You're totally pushing my buttons. Yeah. So this is the long-standing feud between me and Marty O'Donnell. Yeah. So I'm just kidding. I love Marty dearly. He loves me too. So please don't feel like there's any kind of weird feud. I don't want Marty's army swarming my Twitter feed, telling me like, "Dude, you're a hack." But I am the only uncredited audio designer on Halo, I gotta say. And here's how it went down. So Marty was super busy doing single player and doing all the voiceover stuff and things like that. And so I kept saying to him, "Marty, I need sounds for multiplayer." And he's like, yeah, we'll get to it soon. And we were at the 11th hour. I mean, we needed to put sounds in because we were about to send this thing off for final testing and Gold Master. And so I was standing at his desk waiting for him to come back from wherever he was, a meeting, I think it was. And as he's walking up to my desk, he literally puts his hand in front of my face and he's like, "Don't even say the word multiplayer to me. I've got no time for that right now. Don't even bother me." And I'm like, "Marty, it's got to be today or never." So he grabs his headphones off of his desk and he hands them to me, and they're right here. I can show you. Right?
You still have them?
Hell yeah, I do. Are you kidding? He hands me his headphones and he hands me the key to the music library, which is his collection of sound effects, which was all on, DVDs and CDs and shit like that. And he's like, look, if you need sounds, you get the sounds. No one here has time to help you. So like a jackass, I sit down and I'm like, okay, I start going through the sound library. I've got Marty's headphones on, and I have kept them ever since and use them on every single game project that I've ever used them on. It was such an honor. But then we ship the game, and Marty's up there taking all these bows, and he's a big hero, and the music is great, and the audio is so great, and the sound is so great. And does he call his buddy Hardy up to say, and Hardy Lebel was the multiplayer audio designer? No.
No.
So that is the origin of the feud right there. Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's the feud.
Yes.
Oh man, so every time you see Marty, you got some dirt on him. You've got the edge.
I've got the edge. I have the high ground, the moral high ground, and I use it every single time.
Do you use it to get beers? Do you use it to get him to buy you beer or something at the bars?
Meals, Uber rides. I mean, whatever. It's like, Marty, come on. I'm the uncredited Halo.
Yeah.
It's like, all right. Yeah.
Oh man.
Hook you up, yeah. So I don't know if it quite equals out yet, but it's getting close. I'm sure it's getting close.
Yeah. So your time's running thin on your edginess.
Yeah.
But anyways, did you or anyone else at Bungie ever think that Halo would become such a popular, well-known video game franchise? And what do you think of it becoming the sort of killer app for the Xbox and that sort of label that it had?
That is an interesting question. There were a lot of people who believed that Halo was going to be very successful. I mean, obviously, Microsoft bought the intellectual property after our very successful E3 showing. I don't think we thought it was going to be as big as it turned out to be. And the reason for that, I would say, is because I guess I should just speak for myself. I mean, who knows? I might be talking out of my butt and everybody else is like, you're crazy. But my thinking at the time was, okay, we've taken a very successful formula for first-person shooters and we added vehicles. And that's a great innovation. It's a great step forward, but it's not, it's not like it's something that the world has never seen before. It was like, yeah, we added awesome vehicles to first-person shooters. Dude, that's dope. That's great, And then somebody else is going to add who knows what, scuba diving or jetpacks or blah, 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 whatever. But it was, I looked at it as kind of like a very reasonable step forward. I think what I wasn't necessarily taking into account was the fact that it was so well adapted to work on console. And it was really two innovations at once. It was adding vehicles to first-person shooters, because really up to that point that had never been done. And then also it was adapting first-person shooter to work on console. So it was a double whammy. That certainly took me by surprise. I think it maybe took everybody by surprise. Tell you that we had a post-mortem on Halo 1 where the Bungie team was all sitting around and we're talking about what went right and what went wrong. And everybody's like, well, we could do this better and we could do that better. And Jamie Griesmer kind of raised his hand and he said, yeah, we could do all those things better. We could do them differently, but we just shipped Halo. Like, differently. And that caused a huge furor because, there are the people who were like, yeah, absolutely. We could sit back on our laurels and be like, yeah, dude, let's just do it again the same way. But that really wasn't core. And he was just messing around. I don't want to make Jamie sound bad, but he was just kind of teasing everybody, trolling everybody with that comment because he knew that everybody would rise up and be like, no, we can always do it better. We got to care more. And blah, blah, blah. But still, he got the desired emotional reaction. What was the second part of your question?
What do you think about the sort of label that it got as Xbox's killer app, as the killer app? And, after that, it was like all these first-person shooter games would come out and people would be like, oh, man, this is going to be the Halo killer. Halo just really got this sort of legacy as, like, the first-person shooter game on console for a very long time.
I'll be honest with you. We were hearing that there were other killer apps that were in the pipeline as we were working on Halo. As a matter of fact, we had Microsoft guys show up in the studio and say, okay, yeah, well, Bungie, you're working on this game, but wait till you see Azric. Azric is being
Oh,
developed by the R&D department at Microsoft, and they are going to rock your world. And we're sitting there looking at these people thinking, holy crap, it's like daddy's coming home. Like, we got to get Azric's coming, man. They're going to, we're like, oh shit, we got to tighten up our controls and work on our gameplay loops and make everything better. And then they shipped Azric, and we're like, whoa, what the hell is this?
and you're like, whew, not as good
Yeah.
as they said it was gonna be.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was more like my the way I felt. I mean, again, I should speak for myself. We heard stories about Blinks the Tomcat. We heard stories about Azaric. We heard stories about, Splinter Cell was kind of in development, or that was sort of the early days for Splinter Cell. And we had heard a lot of amazing stuff about all these games that were coming down the pipeline. And instead of being competitive with them, our thought was, all right, we got to put our best foot forward. Like, I want us to put our best foot forward and really be like, okay, boom, this is what we think, really would make an Xbox game excellent. This is what we think would be that package. And when the other games came out, clearly they didn't quite hit the same, level of polish and goodness. But part of that is because Halo is really like Marathon 5 in a lot of ways. And I realize this is going to be, absolutely kind of incendiary to long-time Bungie fans or whatever. But I think it's really important for everyone to realize that Bungie had worked together on a lot of titles. We knew what each other were capable of, and we knew what we were good at. And so when it came time to basically turn something that was like a Battlefield clone into a single player console game, everyone was sort of like, okay, well, this audio trick or this music trick, worked pretty well in Myth, or worked pretty well in Oni, but now I've got some ideas about how to do it even better in Halo. And the same ideas about physics, the same ideas about, controls, the same ideas about, you name it, all this other kind of stuff. There were just a ton of opportunities where it was sort of like, well, I've done it before, and I know what would work better based on experience. And there was nobody in the way to say no. I mean, we had a year to get this bitch out the door, right? Like, it was like, all right, what are we going to do? And everyone's like, oh, well, let me tell you how. Here's what we're going to do. And that was a terrific opportunity, because you had a studio and a culture of experienced developers who were really taking lessons learned from Marathon and from Myth and from Oni, and putting them to work in this new IP. But really, it was, taking all those lessons learned from those other games and folding them into something there. So
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a long-winded answer, but I think of it like, that's why we ended up with the double whammy. And I think that's,
and the killer app. And I think part of it also has to do with, this is like Microsoft coming into the video game console scene. And I remember seeing like commercials and stuff for the Xbox, and it's like, that little intro they had where the green goop is like moving around, the cool techno-y music is happening, and then it morphs into the big green X, and it was like, whoa, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of it also was like Microsoft's in the video game console. They have this really cool stylistic console and a badass new video game on it. So I would even say like it was a triple whammy,
Oh yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah, there are some interesting stories about the development of the Xbox hardware. I know there were some rad internal battles that were fought between, the people that were behind the development of the hardware in terms of pushing for its capabilities. And if you look at that Xbox hardware, it was an incredible long shot in terms of, its networking capabilities, its graphical capabilities, and stuff like that. And it was built to sort of be awesome for quite a long time. And so, yeah, like you're right. That was an interesting stretch too on the part of Microsoft and then the development of the hardware. But that team, they were committed to making Xbox. They were committed to making it awesome, and they were also really committed to kind of not listening to, the way that Microsoft wanted them to do stuff and or behave. Here's a little
Yeah.
story. So
I like stories. We all like exclusive stories.
Xbox launches, and we get this email invitation to come to an Xbox launch party in the dining room.
Ooh.
And we walk in, and the Xbox team has decorated the whole place to look like this crazy neon green nightclub. And they had these nurses who must have been strippers walking around in these incredibly tiny microskirts, like nurse costume microskirts, handing out these neon green glow in the dark Jello shots to everybody. and like, we're just a bunch of software nerds. Like, we walk in there, we're looking around, we're like, whoa. And then about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes after we left the party, we started getting email after email from every level of hierarchy at Microsoft, basically saying, this is inappropriate. This is not, this is not how we do business. This is not how we portray, whatever. Like, this makes people uncomfortable, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the Xbox team were definitely hardware rebels for sure. And, and they wanted to create their mark and do something cool at Microsoft. You're right about that, for sure.
They definitely did. Moving on. What were your guys' goals for Halo CE and its multiplayer? What were the focus points in terms of weapon design? You kind of talked about vehicles, but, sandbox, game modes, and, split screen functionality.
Great question. I wanted to make a party game with shooter mechanics. I wanted to make a game that Nintendo could ship, but it was using shooter mechanics. It wasn't using goofball, Mario mechanics or Zelda mechanics, whatever. And that affected the game types that we chose. It affected the sound effects that we designed, the visual effects that we designed. I really wanted it to feel like a party game with shooter mechanics, because I knew that if we put that out there and people could sit down on the couch and play together, or they could connect their Xboxes together across like a subnet on a LAN, that it would just create this incredibly powerful viral effect of people kind of enjoying the game. And so for me, I really wanted it to be as simple as possible. I wanted it to be as accessible as possible. And I wanted it to be as fun and balanced as possible, which was a radical departure from where the Halo team was originally trying to take multiplayer for the franchise. They had something they called warfare mode or invasion mode, where you were supposed to be storming the beach with your team and you'd take an objective, and then the map would reset and you'd have to take your vehicles and attack another objective. And it was like Battlefield. That was the goal. They really wanted to make it feel like a military simulation. I wanted to make it just feel like a party game. And if you think about it, the sound effects of the hill moving from place to place, or, the power-ups spawning, even the inclusion of power-ups was an interesting thing. Like, there were no power-ups until Jason Jones came up to me and he said, I see you have a feature request for power-ups. And I was like, yeah, I really want to put them in because I want to create these areas on the map that are going to draw players' attention and just be this really interesting dynamic thing that's going to create more flow through these static maps. I mean, come on, like, what are you going to do in Rat Race, right? Just run up and hallways. Like, I need to lead people through these maps and make them want to get to places.
Yeah, there was hidden power-ups in that map, I remember.
Absolutely, and all the maps, and that he and I had a kind of philosophical discussion about that, and he's like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I never really envisioned there being power-ups in Halo. And I was like, I really need them for multiplayer. So eventually he relented, thank goodness, and they became a thing. What was funny was that the single-player designers, once they learned that I had made those power-ups, they started to jam them in the single-player maps. They're like, ooh, cool, I can hide this over here, put that over there. So it became a thing, but it wasn't part of the original plan. So anyway, party game, shooter mechanics, bulletproof mechanics, like I said before.
Bulletproof decisions, party game, party mechanics. I mean, that's really what you guys did succeed at, because, when I got this game, and don't tell my parents, well, actually my parents were the ones that bought it for me, but it was an M-rated game, and everyone in my neighborhood, was in like the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th grade, so we shouldn't have been playing it, but we did. And it was just like everyone in my neighborhood had an Xbox and they had a copy of Halo, and it would be like, oh, let's go over to Act Man's house, or let's go over to Max's house or Tim's house and play it. And like, each time we played it, we tried new things, and at each house it was different because everyone had a different setup, and it really was this party shooter game that you could play with your friends. Yeah, and you guys succeeded at that because, we came up with all sorts of different funny ways to play the game, not just in multiplayer, but I told you this before, me and my buddy Max, we were getting so good at playing Legendary Campaign that we came up with this difficulty. It's like a side difficulty of Legendary. It's called Marine Mode, where you have to role play as the Marine. I was always the British one. Max liked to be the Spanish Marine, but basically you could only fire in like 3-round bursts, and you would have to shout at the enemies, and if you got hit down to 1 health, like the Marines, like when they got really damaged, they'd be like, "I'll take you all on," and they'd do this little animation, and we'd do that. Like when you got to 1 health, you would just basically like barrel towards the enemies until you died, sort of thing. So it was like,
that's so cool.
Yeah.
So you guys were role playing your own experience. That's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure there's a million other stories that people have of, different ways they played the game. And if you guys do have anything to share like that, post it in the comments below.
Yeah, please. That'd be awesome.
Those would be fun to read. All right, so let's move on. This is a great question here. So many people, myself included, believe that Halo Combat Evolved is one of the most influential video games of all time. We have, split screen multiplayer, and then we have system link multiplayer. And for consoles, to be able to get 4 consoles together, 16 controllers, 4 TVs, and to be able to hook them all up together to play a game, a party shooter game, how do you see that, the revolution there, in the sort of massive influential legacy that comes from a feature such as split screen and LAN parties?
I mean, I guess I would say that I'm deeply honored, that people would say that they think it's that influential. I'm always so flattered when people talk about the fact that they enjoyed the work, because I'm super passionate about it. I love doing that kind of work. For me, video games are an art form. They're a collaborative art form. You do it, kind of like a symphony plays together. You got to know what everybody's strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how to combine all those elements to make something that's beautiful. I guess I would say that, we stood on the shoulders of giants. Unreal that came before us, Quake that came before us, Counter-Strike that came before us, so many fantastic shooters, Marathon that came before us. So many, fantastic shooters really shaped our understanding of, what to do with shooters. Half-Life, came before us. I mean, these are just amazing experiences, amazing shooter experiences. And we learned so much, from those guys. So if someone was to say, to me, wow, I think Halo is one of the most influential games of all time, I'd be like, yeah, have you ever played Half-Life, dude? That was, oh my God, that game was so cool. So I mean, of course I'm flattered, and I'm thrilled that people, every single time people express that they appreciate it, it's just super gratifying to me to hear that. And I know it is to everybody that was involved in the project. Here's a quick story, talking about standing on the shoulders of giants. Michael Evans walks up to me at one point and he said to me, all right, well, we can't have multiple colors, or we're only going to be able to have 2 colors. I really wanted players to be able to set their own colors for their teams in multiplayer. And that was just something that we had to cut because we didn't have time. He said, we can only have 2 colors. What should they be? I didn't hesitate. I didn't, hem and haw. I just said red and blue. Why? Because those are the colors in Unreal. I mean, those are the multiplayer colors in Unreal. That's what I grew up playing. I know those colors work. They're a bulletproof choice. They're 100%. I'm 100% confident. And he kind of looked at me and he goes, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Absolutely. Like, no hesitation in my mind. We are going to make a bulletproof choice here. I know that red and blue will work as multiplayer colors. So, don't even worry your pretty head about it. Like, let's just go."
Didn't even think about it.
Didn't even think about it. I'm like, yeah, man, we're gonna go back to the mattresses on this. We're gonna go back to the masters who, that we learned at the feet of, and take lessons that they learned. So anyway, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does, and that kind of leads me to another question that I have is, the Halo games, there's a lot of Halo games, and with each new release, things change quite a bit. And so there's always like a group of people that are like, oh man, Halo 2's multiplayer was the best, or Halo 3's multiplayer was the best. And people say this for pretty much all the Halo games, and there's actually a very vocal group of people, of Halo fans, that stoutly believe that Halo 1 has the best, most refined, pure multiplayer out of all of them. And and I thought this was interesting because I do kind of get that feeling that it is very pure and simplistic in a sense. And how would you describe that? I mean,
they're right. I mean, Halo 1 is the purest and most it's the best multiplayer, so.
Oh, there we go. Mystery solved.
I'm just kidding. I'm just messing around. No, it has to do with the purity of intention. For me as a designer, this is a big part of my philosophy. You got to have very clear intentions. The more clear your intentions are, the better your creative work will be as you're doing it. And there were no muddy intentions on Halo Combat Evolved. I knew exactly what I wanted to create, and there was no one who was arguing with me about it or debating it. I knew what I wanted to create. I picked the sounds, I designed the maps, I oversaw the creation of the gameplay logic. I worked with Michael for that stuff. I balanced the guns. I mean, there was no one in my way who said, playtesters are not liking this, or I don't think that the pistol is going to work with focus groups. That was not a conversation that I ever had with anybody.
There were no board meetings or anything. I mean,
no, there weren't. There absolutely weren't. What there were playtests where I would sit down and, I'd spend hours, kind of working on the data for the guns and balancing stuff. And then I'd sit down, and the methodology that I'd like to use was we'd start a match and play it, and then I would watch to see what the players did. And to me, if they immediately hit restart, like, they lose the match and be like, fuck that, let's go again. I know we can win. then I knew I had something right. I was going in the right direction. But if they put the controllers down and they were like, oh God, okay, well, that was enough, then I was going down the wrong path. And believe me, there were times where people would put the controllers down because, the maps were whatever, they weren't balanced the right way, or the guns weren't balanced the right way, or whatever those things were. But I was incredibly sensitive to those tiny fluctuations, because for me, a really successful multiplayer kind of challenging experience, you end up at the end of it feeling like, oh, I know I could have done something better. I know the reason I failed is because of my mistakes, my gameplay. I missed this opportunity, or I missed that play, or whatever. And so I'm always trying to balance in that direction. And that was a huge part of going in that direction. And the fact that I didn't have to justify it to other people or explain it to anybody was very valuable.
And, because wasn't it just like you and Michael Evans that basically did all the multiplayer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. You two guys.
Yeah, it was us. I mean, Michael did all the code stuff for it, and I did all the the data balancing and the maps and implementing the maps and placing the spawn points and the respawn points and blah 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 objectives and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it was us. It was just us, and that's why. Now there's something else to know too, which is that's why it feels pure. That complete the thought there. That's why it feels kind of pure and focused.
Yeah, because it was only designed by two people, and I think as things moved along, we've talked about this before, but when projects get bigger and more people are brought on, what happens?
Oh, it just starts getting muddy, right? I mean, you get competing intentions, or sometimes you just get, even if people aren't competing for in terms of their intentions, sometimes it's just not clear. People will be working and they don't have that perfect clarity of what it is that you're trying to achieve, so they might end up doing something that that doesn't suit the project overall or whatever. But there's something else too to be aware of. I don't want this to sound like, well, good games can only come from a limited number of designers. That's not the case. Good games come, in my estimation, and there are a lot of fantastic, great games out there, but good games come from a team that is incredibly sensitive to their audience and incredibly sensitive to reactions in their audience. They know what they're trying to do. They know which direction that they're trying to go with the work that they're trying to do, and then they're very, very sensitive about the way that they they make those adjustments and those reactions. So you look at games like League of Legends or Dota 2 or there are terrific teams out there, big teams that are doing great work and making really, really interesting games and making them really well balanced. So it's not necessarily about the number of people, but it is about a culture of clarity of intention. You know what you're trying to achieve, and you know what really matters to you, and that's what you refine and balance towards.
Yeah. It's like everyone's on the same pirate ship, and everyone's trying to sail to the same location. There's not like one person that's trying to yank the sail to go to that island because you're all going to the island that's in front.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. And man, video games, and I suspect that this is probably true in an awful lot of creative things, but there's so many opportunities for that kind of clash of creative goals and tensions. That's exhausting. I mean, for me, it's exhausting. If I have a lot of clarity about what I want to achieve, and somebody wants to achieve something else, I don't want to I don't want to argue about it or fight about it. But there's a way to work around that. Actually, I've kind of learned over time, which is I used to approach this, and I've watched a lot of teams approach this from the standpoint of saying, well, I don't want this, and I don't want that. But you know what the trick is, actually? The trick for a creative team to be able to reharmonize is never say what you don't want, only say what you do want.
That's like a life lesson right there.
Absolutely is, because what you'll find really quickly is if you artificially restrict yourself to just saying what you do want, you'll find in many cases that first you'll get a reminder that in most cases everybody wants to ship a game that people love.
Yeah.
They want to make art that people enjoy. But you'll also find out that you have a lot more in common than you think, and that there are a lot of ways to get to creative solutions. So there you go. Boom.
All right, man. So I got one more question, and then we'll finish this up with some final thoughts. So,
Okay.
Hey, Halo 1 launched in 2001, right? And it's 2017. So there's been a lot of Halo games out there, and with the initial intention of Halo being a sort of party fun game that you can play with your friends, what would you say if I told you that the newest game had no split screen and no system link, meaning there's absolutely no way to play this game with your friends on the same couch?
Well, from a personal level, I would say it's a missed opportunity. However, I also recognize the business realities. So the intention when we were doing Halo 1 was there was no Xbox Live at the time. They told us that there would be an Xbox Live solution, but we learned at about halfway through the project through Halo 1 that they weren't going to have Xbox Live ready in time for Halo 1 launch. So we had to come up with some other solution to make multiplayer work the way that we knew that it could. Mm-hmm. Now Xbox Live is not only, not only does it work, but it works really, really well. And it's really a big signature part of the Xbox business model and a big part of their kind of online experience. So the intention behind the latest version of Halo is to capitalize on all those features through Xbox Live. So it doesn't surprise me. Let's put it that way. It doesn't surprise me that would be the case. It saddens me though, because the idea, I tell you, the number of times that I've heard stories like yours where you're sitting with your friends and they're playing together. I've heard this from soldiers, who were fighting overseas. They'd get back to base and they'd hang out with their buddies and they'd play. I've heard it from people in the Navy who were hanging out with their shipmates. They'd take over like a little room on the ship and they'd sit there and they'd play multiplayer together. I've heard it from prisoners, who said, well, we get Xbox privileges and we'd be able to sit there and I'm not even kidding. I mean, I've kind of heard this from different people in the course of my career. And I love that. I mean, that bringing people together to share that play experience is at the core of the party game that I really wanted to build. So for me, it's super important. I understand why it isn't as important to 343, and why it isn't a big part of the game now, but I miss that, and I love it, and I love that it was so important to people.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of like my big thing, is Halo was always that game that, you know, regardless of whether you liked the last one better, you know, you could always play it with your friends and talk about it and do all that. So it Absolutely. I think pretty much everyone would agree, like it is a missed opportunity, and it's really just unfortunate.
Do you want me to be more, should I be more damning? Like, should I be like, those guys they're screwing it up?
I'm not going to censor or control what you say. You go off on whatever tangents you like. I'm just here to be me and ask the questions.
It makes me sad, but you know, I get it. I understand why they're not going that way. They're also, it seems like they're really pushing into competitive play. Like they really want the new versions of Halo to be something that people play competitively in kind of an esport format.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, you know, Joe Staten is a camping, cheating, screen.
Oh, he's a screen peeker?
Oh, my God.
Man.
He'd sit there and, like, he'd camp his ass somewhere with the sniper rifle and be like, hey, do that damn grunt laugh and just because he's the damn peeker. That's you are a screen peeker.
You heard it here, everyone. You heard it here.
Anyway, so you know you can't really do that in an esports situation because it's not good, man. It's not a good look. So.
Yeah, very true. Well, all right, Hardy. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and you know, provide some very interesting stories and discussions for me and everyone else that watches these videos. So I really appreciate it, man.
Hey, it is my pleasure, buddy. I'm always gratified, like I said, to be able to share these stories with people and just share the products of the work that I love so much, and I'm so glad it brings people a lot of satisfaction.
All right, man.
Give it a chance, and you know, hey, whatever. Come learn about level design. Come check out my stuff.
Go check out his Level Design Video Game Creator Academy. Links will be in the description, and also to your YouTube channel. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Is there any last thing you'd like to say? Any final story or a quick little tidbit of interesting backstory info?
I will make one value judgment for you here, because I know this is something that you and I have talked about before. Microtransactions in Halo, they got no place in the game. They're just solely based on greed, and Microsoft shouldn't be supporting that, and I'm ashamed that they are. It's got no place in our franchise, and they should cut them out of there. I can make a business case as to why that would be so, and maybe I'll write a blog post about it, but I don't like that.
That would be pretty interesting to read. I mean, from not just from like a video game consumer standpoint, but from the viewpoint of someone that actually designed games and specifically designed games in the same franchise. So you should definitely write something up, or hey, maybe we could have another video talking about stuff like that.
Absolutely. If you want to, I'd love to. I'll bore you with the business details and.
Oh man, I won't be bored.
That's awesome.
All right. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. That's all we got for today. This is the Act Man signing out. Peace.
Take care, everybody, and thanks, Act. See you next time.